you want us to talk about.
We better hurry and talk about stuff.
Just
Because it's
be
gonna get
careful.
cold.
What happened?
Golly, look who's here. It's Pat. Look.
Oh my goodness, isn't that
We were just sitting down to have dinner. So nice of you to join us. We were having a toast, weren't we now?
Yes.
Let's toast Pat.
Hi, Pat.
Here's the
To
Pat.
Pat.
Yes, Pat.
Hey Pat, want some wine?
It's
Good. Look,
Better
you
hurry
like
up.
it. Napa Ridge, White Zinfandel. Golly, that's good. So glad you could join us. Pie, boy, that pie was good.
That calls for a second piece.
Want a bite, Patty?
Calls for,
Okay, here.
calls for a second piece.
Strawberry rhubarb.
Delicious.
Dad picked it out.
It was delicious.
That's what Esty should do.
What's that?
Figure it out.
I'm sorry, Dad, this is stuck in here real good.
Well, I have
All
to
right.
play for so.
Whoops.
Give it all to him.
This is delish.
Want a drink of wine, Patty? Here it is.
Wine. We don't serve our wine by the mugful here.
Sure you do.
Is the video running too?
Yes, it is.
everything's
Oh, I see.
fine
See
and
that?
Well, let's hear
Red
from
light.
you. Let's hear from Poland.
You're gonna announce what you're gonna do here?
no.
Oh, just,
Delish, you're right, Dad.
Wish I could make pie that good.
Oh, yours tastes
Yeah, it's okay, but
Ask the question.
It's okay. My mouth was full. Very good. And real.
Good.
I forgot to mention that I had an older brother.
Well, you're gonna start this in a minute.
Did you know? Huh? Did you know?
Hey,
Did you ever hear
the
that?
video is on.
Did you?
Saw a
Yeah,
picture of
forget.
him. That's okay.
You saw a picture?
You had an older brother. How much older?
I don't know, 14 months or something like that. He died from infantile paralysis
When he was, how old?
when he was just an infant.
Oh, I thought he died when he was like 5.
No, he was only maybe 3 at the most.
So you
I
were
think
a
that's what you
baby?
told me was 3.
Huh?
I think
You were a
told me.
baby?
Yeah.
And he was
Yeah.
3?
Yeah.
I thought I remembered about you having a picture there.
No, never had a picture of him. The only picture that
Oh, I thought that
we
was him
have
in the picture.
shows my mother, father, and the 3 of us, myself, Jane, and Henry. I don't
Okay,
recall.
maybe that's the picture I'm thinking of. I
Yeah.
thought there was one.
How tall was Judge?
Sure.
5'4",
Now you know her.
Buckcher's 4'11".
if
Wow.
that.
Now she's about
She's
4'8".
probably
Yeah.
Now we know why Johnny and Wayne are short.
Yeah. I'm just totally amazed that everybody
was-
else is so tall.
He weighed about 160 some pounds though.
Really? Because the picture I've seen of him, he wasn't
No,
heavy.
he was hefty,
Muscular.
muscular.
Oh, well.
I was as skinny as a rail.
Well, let's go back to the beginning.
In the beginning, God said, "Let us make man."
That's good, that's good.
And they made me.
And he made Jaju, and he put him in Poland. Do you know what his parents' names were? Off the top of your head?
His father's name was John also.
What was his mother's name?
I don't know. I don't think I ever,
That was probably a name
if
of
I
a-
got it, it's
Perhaps.
written down, but I'm not sure that I have.
And the name was originally pronounced Boltrucyk?
Yeah, but it was spelt with a CZYK, which is the Polish spelling. my father inadvertently dropped the Z when he applied for citizenship.
Accidentally, or?
Accidentally.
Accidentally, because
Right.
I just couldn't spell.
So that we started spelling it Boltrucyk. And however, my birth certificate says CZYK because of the confusion. Because when I apply for a passport, I have to spell my name CZYK.
Because that's.
But my legal,
But your social security and everything.
Social Security is CYK. Yep.
You should apply in with the Z too, maybe it's quite there too.
So he was born in
Not unless you paid that way, or unless there's somebody else who did.
85.
1885.
Archer was born.
1891. Before she ever went in the nursing home, I was there one day and she was showing me pictures in the album. So I was asking her questions. And she went along really good. And then I said to her, what were Christmases like when you were a girl in Poland? All I can think of is it must have been hardship or something wasn't a good memory because she got mad and didn't want to talk about it.
They were hard.
Why do you ask, she said. Don't ask me now. I didn't dare ask her anything else after that.
Well,
I just wanted to know these little things so I could make note of them and
see,
you know,
for
pass
years,
them on. But she didn't want to talk about it.
for years, my father and my mother didn't observe Christmas.
Well, there's another good reason for not answering me.
See? Then later on, after my father died, my mother reverted back to going to Catholic Church.
Well,
But-
tell us more about the,
But while my father was alive,
after it.
that would have nothing to do with the Catholic Church. My father was firmly opposed to anything like that because he felt that that was in lieu of subjugation that he suffered in the old country. No. He felt that that was part and parcel of it. And when he was ill, and my older brother had died, my father was ill at the same time with influenza. When he got back on his feet, the first thing he did was go to church. And the first thing the priest said, pay up. You owe your dues. And my father, at that point, got put out with him and drifted away, you know. And finally, when we moved to Chicopee, this is from Hartford, when we moved to Chicopee, he started associating with the International Bible Students. That's when he learned to read. My mother taught him how to read.
And where does she get her teaching ability?
She went to school in Poland. 4 years.
And he never went to school at all?
Not a day.
So when he came here, he couldn't read, he couldn't write English, Polish, anything?
Absolutely nothing.
Somebody must have helped him. with
So
his
what was his
application to the
childhood
States.
like? He had,
Well, his childhood was very rough because he was shuffled around from half-ass relatives and whatnot.
till he was 17.
Till he was 17 when he went in the Russian Army.
Was that like the, I mean, that was the youngest they could take him into the Army, was 17? Was that
I
right?
don't know if that
Or
was
it
the
just
youngest,
happened
but
to
that's
be
when it happened,
coincidence when he was 17?
Yeah, that's when they caught up to him.
But he shuffled around because he was an orphan, so he was
Because he got
shuffled.
orphaned.
So he was shuffled
Yeah.
amongst the relatives?
Right. He was amongst the relatives to begin with when he was younger, and then shuffled off to well-to-do people who were no relatives at all, and to serve as a indentured servant.
For a room and board?
Yeah.
So he didn't really get money, he just had to, they
No,
took
no,
care of him
that's
and
right.
he
Yeah.
served them.
Yeah.
Try to imagine a 10 or a 12-year-old living like that.
Yeah. Rough life.
And he did it from the time he was 4 when his father died?
Yeah. Time is bored.
And you said his mother died when, about the same time?
I don't know exactly. I may have it written down if my mother remembered that or knew of it. But she died shortly afterwards.
And that's when he hit the relatives.
So what happened to the rest of his family?
Well, his half-sisters had immigrated to the United States.
Yeah, but what,
And-
now he was the product of a second marriage,
Right,
so they were all older than him.
right.
So when the father died, okay, these half-sisters, were they half-sisters on his mother's side or his father's side?
On his father's side.
Okay, so when his mother died, then he was like, sort of like the outcast.
Yeah, right. Especially because the half-sisters had already taken off.
Oh, they were that much older than him.
Yeah, they had already taken off to live in the United States.
And there was a brother.
No, only half-sisters, 3 half-sisters.
So at 17, he got conscripted into the army then?
Right.
Right when the army.
Yeah, he went to serve the Tsar.
Or till he was 22?
Then he worked in Germany.
How'd he get out of the army?
He deserted.
So then what did he do?
Did he ever tell you the actual story about it, or is this
Yeah.
hearsay?
Oh,
He
yeah.
sat down and he told you how he,
He told me how he and his friends, I think it was 2 friends, crossed the North Sea ice and went into Germany.
they just hoofed it over.
Yeah.
What would have been the penalty if he had gotten caught before he got out of it?
Probably would have been shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, desertion, sure.
Yeah. If they had failed once and they weren't shot, they were under. Then maybe the second time they would have. Because it wasn't wartime, they probably, maybe they would have got away with it. But there was a lot of hatred between the Russians and the Poles. They went out of their way, the Poles went out of their way to try to make things difficult for the Russian officers, the superiors. One of the stories that he told me, an officer had a monkey as a pet. Huh?
That's kind of hard to imagine in that country.
Yeah.
But-
Well, yeah. Well, that's the
They
story
didn't
anyway.
Yeah, you think somebody would have ate it?
He had this monkey. No? So the monkey would imitate whatever somebody did. No?
Uh-oh.
So one day the monkey sat there watching his master lather his face up and shave. Right? So he pretended he was doing that too. So at the first opportunity the soldiers had, when the officer was out of the way, they handed the monkey a razor. He proceeded to cut himself to pieces. Screaming and all that, and he killed himself.
That was how
That
they
was-
got back at the girls.
That was their way of getting back at the officer.
When they went into Germany, they just accepted them there? I mean, I don't understand. Today you have to,
Have a passport and everything.
yeah. They worked in Germany,
Well, there was no love lost between the Germans and the Russians.
so they kind of
So they
accepted
they
them.
gave him a safe
asylum.
They
harbor.
gave him asylum.
And how long did he work in Germany?
2 years. Yeah, then he shipped out. I even got the name of the ship that he shipped out on.
So what did he do while he was in Germany?
Anything.
Whatever he could.
labor.
He was a laborer.
Stay and saved his
Uneducated.
money?
Huh?
And saved his money to
Yeah,
come over here?
right, so he could pay his passage.
What was the name of the boat? You don't know that?
I'd have to look it up. I've got them written down.
But he didn't know, he just shipped over here and came over and,
Yeah,
he's one of the guys Lee Iacocca was always talking about that came in, didn't know anybody.
that's right. That's right. He came through Ellis Island and all the rest of that. No, didn't know.
So he lived in Long Island when
He lived in Long Island, got himself a job, bought himself a bicycle so he could go back and forth to work and stuff like that.
And at that point now, he must be 25?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, then he came to Holyoke.
Why did he come to Holyoke?
Well, the Poles used to gravitate to where other Poles were. You know.
Somebody said, hey, it's a good place to go.
Good place to
We got
go.
jobs
Right,
here or whatever.
Yeah, right, so he went,
These
you know.
immigrants still do that.
Oh, yeah.
All the Poles still immigrate to Holyoke.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
okay, so
there-
then
There
that's
are
where,
more, you know, in Chicago, there are
Collect
more
more
Poles in
welfare.
Chicago than there is in Warsaw.
I thought it was
A lot
more
of-
blacks.
So that too.
There's probably more blacks around
when
Poles,
you,
but
when
there
you
are
got
more
to
Poles.
Holyoke, that's where you met Bobcha?
Yeah.
So
Right.
how did she get to Holyoke? Where did she come from? Did she live anywhere near him in Fulham? Obviously, they
No.
never knew each other, but
What was her
where she lived, was that ruled by Russia too?
Oh, yeah. Came from about the same area.
What's the name of the place?
I don't know offhand.
How-
Rushloff or something like that.
Yeah.
I thought
How
it
could
was
she
Buck-
get out then?
Yeah.
Let her emigrate from?
Oh,
the-
yeah.
the
She was a legal immigrant. Yeah.
So what made her come? I mean, she,
Her brothers and sisters were here.
They
They
were
planned to
already
bring
here.
the rest of the family too, mother and father, but the mother and father never made it.
so, did she have the same kind of upbringing as far as schooling and like that? I mean, was it,
No, she had it easier because she was the youngest. And her brother and sisters had already come to this country.
She got educated in Poland.
What
She
did
had
she do
4
when
years.
she got here?
She went to night school and then she
No, I
worked as a maid.
Oh, okay, that's what I mean, what work did she do?
Were her brothers and
Um,
sisters in
so-
the Holyoke area?
Yeah.
They were here.
One sister lived in Springfield and one sister lived in Willimantic. And there was no Polish church in Willimantic at that time. So the Poles in Willimantic used to travel to Holyoke to go to church. And that's where my
That's
mother and
how
father went. And my
Well-
father was looking all, well, he wanted to get away from sister's influence, you know. So he wanted to he went to Hartford to work. And he worked at the Hartford Machine Screw, which was in business for many years. No. And later on,
It's your supper now.
when, I think it was my mother's insistence that they could move back. She wanted to be near her sister, her oldest sister particularly, and that's when we moved to Chicopee.
so what, was,
So you wanted
Bobcha went to school and she had,
She lived for a while in Springfield, and she went to Chestnut Street Junior High School nights.
oh really?
Yep.
So she only had fourth grade education in Poland.
Right. And she had,
Why did she stop going to school? She didn't come here until she was,
because the Russians closed the school.
and then when
And the
she-
priest came along and said, oh, you had enough schooling, you can write letters now, you stay home and help out on a homestead.
Oh. You said before that, she taught school?
She taught underground school to other Polish youngsters because they had closed the school. The Russians had closed the Polish.
Gosh, it's like having a spy in the family.
Yeah.
Underground school.
And probably 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah, she was around 9 or 10 or
9 or
something.
10 years old.
Yeah.
She's a school teacher.
She must have really liked to learn, to want to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, she was quite fluent. She was very, very good in writing, you know, in the Polish language, you know,
Mhm.
and she always was good at that. And she used to write letters to the old country for her two sisters.
Hmm.
They were not as fluent as she was.
What?
So she worked as a maid when she first came
Yeah.
here?
How old was she when she came here?
19.
19. Well, she wasn't up here too long when she got married then, was
No,
she?
she, 19,
Oh,
18 or
she
19.
must have been
19,
18 because they get married at 20 and she'd been here
Yeah,
2
right.
years.
Yeah.
18. So,
Still, that's quite an adventurous life for the first 20 years, you know.
Oh,
stop
yeah.
and think about it, like,
Well,
especially for a job dude.
my father was desperate to own something. You know, when we lived in Hartford, years later, I remember my folks used to talk about it. He bought himself a piece of land in Wethersfield, Connecticut.
He did.
And they used to travel from Hartford on a trolley car to Wethersfield where
visit.
he used to work a garden. And my mother used to complain and so on and so forth that this was foolish and all that, you know. And when they moved to Chicopee, of course, all the payments he had made on that land were out the window and lost it. My mother always threw it up to him, you know, that it was a foolish venture.
And it wasn't. You should have kept it.
Well, he was so desperate to own something.
And they never owned the house.
Never owned the thing, never owned the car.
They never owned a car in their whole life.
Was he able to drive?
No, he wanted, because
I know what you were
because of
like.
my mother's ability to communicate, he wanted her to get the license.
Should we just put her on a box and put her on that seat and let her go?
Yeah,
So she can
that-
see over the windshield.
My oldest, my aunt, my mother's oldest sister, she was a good driver. The first car I ever drove was her car.
Boltrucyk?
Yep. Yeah, I drove her Model.
It must have been very difficult for him because you know, because he had so many wants and everything
Yeah.
and was never able to achieve them. Well, maybe on the other hand, maybe he did it through you.
Oh yeah, well, when,
You know.
like I started saying, when I bought my first house on Page Boulevard, he took a lot of pride in the fact that here now Boltrucyk owns something. As a matter of fact, for me to get the house, he had to sign for me because I was of draft age
Oh, really?
during the war. See?
Yeah.
But I got kicked out of the draft because of the back injury that I had when I was hit by a car riding a bicycle. And the Golden Navy doctor spotted the scars and wouldn't let me in. See? So I turned around and bought the house.
Wow, if you
You
hadn't
only
been
had
that
the
far, it would have
house.
changed
What?
your whole
He only
life.
had the house a short time though before he died.
Oh yeah. Well, he had already been operated on.
What was it,
Oh.
only maybe 2 years?
I didn't know that. I thought he had leukemia.
He had cancer.
Cancer.
Cancer of the liver and stomach.
I thought it was leukemia. I always heard.
He had been operated on in 42. And then he seemed to recover, went back to work and so on, and then it came back on him. And he died in 44.
I wonder if it had anything to do with his upbringing.
The cancer?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because there's no history of cancer in the family. It's not to speak of.
You don't know.
Well, they didn't even know what
Doesn't
cancer
this-
was
No.
years ago.
Besides, you don't know that much about his family either,
Yeah,
his background.
No.
They're all gone.
Yeah.
They could have died
time
from
when he was-
cancer and you didn't
Yeah,
know what
when
it
he was
was.
4 years old,
That's
how
what
would he know?
his mother and father died young. Maybe that's what they died.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
I
He
always
must have
thought
really,
it was
he must have
leukemia.
really liked that house then for,
Oh, he took a lot of pride in, you know. And I remember not long afterwards, you know, is when I started building the garage. And he took a lot of pride in that, you know, that I was building something. But he was, by then he was
I was
so...
gonna say, he must have been sick by then.
By then he was so poor, he couldn't do anything. He wanted to help, you know, and all that, but he couldn't.
You remember you asked me one time if I could remember him?
Yeah.
Patty could remember him. You
Yeah,
asked-
Patty could.
And I said, I don't know if I really remember him, but I remember somebody
That's
who
Patty.
used to rub my head with their rough whiskers and smelled like peppermints. Used to hold me and squeeze me too tight, hug me too tight, and used to scratch my face and my head with their rough whiskers.
Yeah.
And he says, yeah, that was him. I remember that, but I can't actually remember him. But I do remember somebody who used to squeeze me too tight,
Yeah.
hold me too tight, and scratch me with their whiskers and smelled like peppermint. And he says, yeah, he always carried peppermint. But I can't say.
Quite
I
a
remember
past.
him.
You know, even though he was completely uneducated, he had a ability to do mathematics. When I came home from school with homework and all that, he'd look at the subjects, you know, on geometry, for instance, and he'd comprehend that, you know, about
Really?
angles and all that
Wow.
stuff. You know, he would examine that, look at it, you know, and
Imagine what he could have done if he'd been
he
educated.
did it in a devious way. I don't know how he ever figured out, see, some of the things, but he would sit down there and write down some of the questions and answers and so on in Polish, and how it was, you know. You know, he understood what a right angle was, and about the 60, 980 degrees in a triangle, things like that. He understood that. I never could understand how he knew that, but he did.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's a very typical story, I bet you, of a lot of them.
Oh yeah. Well.
Struggle to the bitter end. And,
Yeah.
and you know, I never could understand that.
My father, I think, would have done, if my mother had sort of gone along with things, he would achieve much more. I think, you know, he wanted to own things. He wanted to own a car.
He
wanted to own property. But my mother was
careful.
She was so concerned about failure that she held him back. Yeah. Now my aunt, for instance.
In the end, she was never able to grow in any way because of that.
Now my aunt, Josephine, she was older, but her husband was out. Oh, he was a good farmer. They owned a lot of acreage in Willimantic. It's all built up now, but back years ago, I remember when it was a farm, the house that he built is still standing. You know, and my aunt lived in that house for many, many years. You know.
Did he die too before her?
Yes, he died when I was, let's see, I was around 8 or 9 years old. I remember the night that he died. Albert, my cousin, came over. We lived about, half a mile, maybe 3/4 mile.
That's
from where-
Josephine's son.
Right. And he came over to tell us that his father was ill, and my folks rushed over there, and he died that night.
So she lived a long time after he died?
Oh, yeah. She lived when she was 90.
Oh my gosh.
Is she the one who died in
93 or
the Parkway
95?
nursing home?
Yeah, she
yeah.
lived in
Boy,
that.
how
Yeah.
about,
One of them died right here in Enfield.
Enfield Nursing Home.
Parkway.
they must have had something in their genes that really
Yeah.
cranks them
Well,
up,
and
right?
her other sister was 95 when she died.
Wow.
So they all
in
three
Boston.
of them lived into the 90s. That's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. Now, the one that died earliest was my uncle out in Chicago. He died when he was 80, 82 or 4 or something like that. Yeah.
Hardly got a diaper.
So she's already out and
She's outlived them all.
outlived them all
Yeah.
as far as
Yeah.
years.
That's interesting, you know, that, I think it's rare too,
Yeah.
to have that in one family.
It is so long.
Yeah, that's,
I told Leo, I think, that he will live a long time too, like his mother.
it's meanness, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's just
It's in the
genes. It's genetic.
Genetic meanness.
Here, have an Andy's mint. You know, that's,
I don't need this, but I will. I
Boy,
had
it's
those two in my pockets
nothing
since
like
Monday
No,
night.
I told you I had some more.
Yeah.
Well, when we went out to supper, they gave us some mints, and I just stuck them in my pocket because Holly or Don didn't eat any. I guess we will eat too.
My mother worked at the Westinghouse
I didn't know that.
later on, too, at the time that I first started looking, she was working, no, even before that, she was working at the Westinghouse.
Did she work when you were a child?
Yeah, on and off, she was working.
Didn't you,
Well, she didn't work steady then.
didn't you quit school in 11th grade?
Right.
And then went back?
It was, what was it, the 10th grade?
Why did you quit?
Because my father was sick that year and couldn't work. So I quit school and to help out the family.
Is that when you were working in the
And then you went
I
back?
worked as, in the A&Ps as a clerk. Prior to that, I worked as an order boy, and then I went to work as a clerk.
Then you went back to school full-time, didn't you?
Well, as soon as my father got back on his feet, he was insistent, you go back to school. So I was, at that time, I was registered to go to business classes in commerce at night. I had finished continuation school because I wasn't 16 when I quit. I was 50. Okay. So I continued both my business courses in commerce and went back to Tech High to complete my courses there.
And you graduated from Tech?
Yeah.
I didn't know that either.
You didn't know you graduated from
1935.
Tech?
I would have graduated in 34 if I hadn't been out a year.
1935, you were still the same age as the rest of your class.
No, I was 19. I was a year older.
A year older. So that's the formal education you had, Tech High and business school.
Yeah, well, later on, I went to specialty electronics courses and so on when I worked in Sickles. And during the war, I took these management courses. I was a foreman at Gilbert and Barker. And then later on, when I went to Sickles, my interest in electronics was sufficient to generate some interest on their part, so I progressed pretty well. And I took courses at the Western Mass Electric. They had, when solid state devices came in and all that, you know, I took all that.
Was that when you and Teddy were in business?
Well, 49, we got together and formed our sort of a partnership where we were selling TV and installing all that sort of.
Yeah, I remember all
I
that.
remember that.
Yep, and,
Span television.
yeah, right. Yeah.
They didn't
I
want
can
to
remember
say
that first
Boltrucyk
TV.
and
The
Clisano's
first show we
television
saw
because they figured
in
nobody would
Springfield.
ever-
Oh,
It was
yeah.
the Long Ranger, and he had this antenna, and he had Bo out in the yard walking around with the antenna, trying to find a place where it would.
No, the thing was standing up above the roof.
No, but at one time he had it out. You had it. The sidewalk was beside the house, and there was that strip of grass and the hedge, and Bo was walking around. It was attached. You had him going left and right, and walking around out there, and we were watching the picture, trying to see where it would come in.
In fact, the closest transmitter was down in New Haven then.
I know, you probably put it on the roof afterwards, but I remember Bo walking around out there while you tinkered
On
with
the
the
roof,
set.
I built what they called then, the amateurs had developed what they call a collinear antenna, which was a 8-element antenna. You know, great big arms on it. It was half wave instead of quarter wave. And I had that thing 40 feet in the air.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And I used to orient it like this.
Run that program.
Yeah.
Well,
And
my dear.
I was able to get pictures from New York. And the RCA engineers claimed that we were doing something that wasn't kosher and that we couldn't possibly get pictures from New York. But Lou Richmond, myself, and 2 other guys built these kits that we bought from RCA and got our television pictures in Springfield. Later on, we started buying. Lou Richmond started handling TV sets, and when Teddy and I got together and formed a partnership, we used to buy our sets from Lou Richmond, and Lou Richmond showed us how to modify them. He was an advanced amateur, so that it was to improve the sensitivity. And when they tried to sell TV sets that the manufacturers made without the modification, they couldn't receive pictures. They got very snowy results.
What was the closest station to
New Haven.
I thought you said there was a
Yeah.
station.
It was channel.
One in Boston from
Shortly after that, Boston came in, and then there was a channel 11 in Providence. And I remember about 1951, we could get Boston if you were in a good location. But most of the time you had to be satisfied with just one transmitter, channel 6, New Haven. Later on became channel 8.
I
I think it
thought
still
the-
is channel
Yeah, still.
I mean, it transmitted from there. So that's where the signal had to come from?
from New Haven.
I thought there was someplace closer. I thought Progan Mountain or somewhere had a had some
No,
little,
that wasn't until UHF came in, Channel 22. That was the first UHF in this area. Channel 22 opened up on Proven Mountain.
that was the
No.
one I was thinking of.
We are gonna have to be hitting the road pretty soon, so
Yeah.
we should thank Patty for coming to dinner.
How'd you enjoy that, Pat?
Hope you enjoyed dinner, which is a nice pork roast, which you kind of missed. But the pie was great. Yeah, you sure had some of that. And the conversation was super, so I'm sure you liked that. So everybody wants to say goodbye.
Bye, Pat.
Bye, Pat.
Bye, Patty.